The vote passed, but barely. 27 species voted in favor of human membership. 23 voted against. 3 abstained. It was the narrowest margin in council history, and it satisfied no one. The species that voted yes did so reluctantly, driven by desire for precursor knowledge rather than any real acceptance of humanity. The species that voted no felt betrayed and angry. They accused the council of giving in to blackmail, and the ones who abstained simply wanted to watch what happened before committing. Daehyun thought they had won, but winning, he quickly learned, was just the beginning of the real fight. 3 weeks after the vote, the attacks began. The Kryn, a warrior species that had voted against human membership, launched raids on human colonies. They struck hard and fast, hitting mining outposts and research stations. They weren't trying to conquer territory. They were trying to capture people. Specifically, they were trying to capture linguists. The first raid hit a colony called New Seoul. Jihoon, the colony's governor, sent desperate messages as Kryn warships descended on his world. The defense fleet was overwhelmed in minutes. Kryn soldiers stormed the university, the research center, anywhere that might house linguistic experts. They took 17 people, including one of Daehyun's colleagues from the original expedition. Daehyun watched the news reports from Earth, feeling sick. People were dying because of what he discovered. Families torn apart because humans could speak a language others couldn't. His sister Nari called him, her face pale on the video screen. She was a teacher, living peacefully on Earth with her family. Is this our future now? Living in fear because you opened some ancient door? I didn't know this would happen, Daehyun said weakly. Didn't you? You gave the council an ultimatum. Share our discovery or we keep it to ourselves. What did you think desperate species would do? Ask nicely. The call ended badly. Daehyun sat alone in his apartment staring at his hands. The same hands that had unlocked precursor secrets. The same hands that had inadvertently painted a target on every human in the galaxy. Minho found him there hours later. You can't blame yourself. Why not? I'm the one who figured out the language. I'm the one who went to that facility. If you hadn't, someone else would have eventually, or the knowledge would have stayed buried forever. Neither option is better than this. But Daehyun wasn't sure. The precursor sphere had warned him. This knowledge destroyed its creators. Now it was destroying humans too, just in a different way. The political situation deteriorated rapidly. Several council species were backing the Kryn secretly, funneling them intelligence about human colony locations and defense capabilities. They claimed publicly to condemn the attacks, but their actions told a different story. They wanted humans humbled, punished for their audacity. Hyejin worked 18-hour days trying to build alliances, negotiate ceasefires, and protect human interests. But she was fighting a losing battle. The council was turning on them. Even Tareth, the Velkari, who had seemed sympathetic, advised caution. Your people have unleashed something dangerous, Tareth told Hyejin in a private meeting that Daehyun attended. Perhaps it would be better if you shared all the precursor data immediately. Remove yourselves as a target. Appeasement? Hyejin's voice was cold. We give them everything they want and they'll suddenly respect us? That's not how this works. Then how does it work? I don't know, Hyejin admitted. But I know giving up isn't the answer. Daehyun had an idea forming. A crazy, desperate idea. But crazy and desperate seemed appropriate for the situation. He requested another trip to the precursor facility site, or what remained of it. The planet was still there, scarred and cooling. The facility was gone, but maybe something remained. Some clue about what to do next. Taehyun agreed to take him, though he thought it was pointless. They arrived to find the planet surrounded by ships. Not human ships, not council ships. Warships from a dozen species all watching each other suspiciously. Everyone wanted to see if any precursor technology could be salvaged from the ruins. This is dangerous, Taehyun said. If any of those ships decide to attack us, we're dead before we can jump away. But Daehyun had to try. He landed on the planet's surface, searching through the cooled debris. Most of it was fused slag, impossible to identify. But in what had been the central chamber, he found something. A small fragment of the sphere. Not enough to be functional, but enough to contain a final message. He activated it using the precursor language. The fragment projected a brief hologram. The precursor AI, or what remained of it. Its final words. If you're seeing this, the test has begun. You have the knowledge. You have the power. Now you face the choice that destroyed us. Will you hoard it, use it to dominate, or will you share it freely, trusting others to do the same? There is no right answer that works for everyone, but there is a right approach: cooperation, trust, the willingness to be vulnerable for the sake of something greater. The message ended. The fragment crumbled to dust in Daehyun's hands. He returned to the ship with a new understanding. The precursors didn't fail because they had too much knowledge. They failed because they stopped trusting each other. Factions formed, secrets were kept. Each group thought they alone should control the technology, and that mistrust destroyed them. Humanity was making the same mistake, holding the precursor data like a bargaining chip, using it for leverage, creating resentment and fear instead of cooperation. Back on Earth, Daehyun called for a meeting with Heejin and the human government's leadership. He presented his idea. It was radical, probably political suicide, but he believed it was right. We need to teach everyone the precursor language, not just council members. Everyone who wants to learn. We make it public, free, available to any species anywhere. The politicians stared at him like he had lost his mind. That's our advantage, one said. The one thing that gives us leverage. You want to give it away? Yes, Daehyun said firmly. Because keeping it is what will destroy us. The precursors hoarded knowledge. They kept secrets from each other. It tore them apart. We're heading down the same path. Species attacking us because they're desperate. Others resenting us because we have something they don't. This only ends one way, unless we change course. Hyejin studied him. You realize if we do this, we lose our special status. We become just another species again. All that political capital we earned gone. I'd rather be alive and ordinary than dead and special, Daehyun said. The debate raged for hours. Sunwoo, a strategic advisor, argued that giving away their advantage was madness. Others agreed. But slowly others came around to Daehyun's view. The current path led to war, to isolation, to humanity being viewed as either a threat or a resource to exploit. Finally, Hyejin made the decision. We'll do it, but we do it right. We create a comprehensive learning program, linguistic guides, audio recordings, teaching materials. We make it as easy as possible for any species to learn, and we announce it publicly at the council, so everyone knows we're acting in good faith. 1 week later, they returned to the council chamber. The tension was worse now. The Kryn attacks had killed hundreds of humans. Retaliatory strikes by human forces had killed Kryn. Other species were choosing sides. The galaxy was sliding toward war. Daehyun stepped to the speaking platform. Behind him, Minho and Jiwon were ready with the teaching materials they had prepared. Thousands of hours of work condensed into accessible formats. He began to speak in precursor tongue, and again the chamber walls glowed. Everyone watched, some in wonder, others in envy. Then he switched to common tongue. The precursor language has been a source of conflict. Species fighting over knowledge. Humans attacked for our ability to speak it. This has to stop. Today, we're releasing everything we know about the precursor language. Free. Public. Available to everyone. Shocked silence. Then chaos. Voices shouting. Threshmora looked furious. Others looked confused. Some looked relieved. Daehyun continued over the noise. It's not easy to learn. It requires approaching language differently than most species are used to. You have to feel it, not just think it. But anyone can do it with practice and patience. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Faster than light. Faster than ships carried on quantum communication networks that spanned thousands of systems. By the time the Sejong reached human space, Everyone knew that humans had access to precursor site. Everyone knew they had retrieved data. And everyone wanted it. The council chamber was packed. Not just the regular representatives, but military commanders, corporate leaders, and intelligence operatives from dozens of species. They filled every seat, every standing space. The air hummed with translated conversations in 100 languages. Hyejin stood at the speaking platform again. 6 months ago, she had stood here asking for membership. They had laughed at her. Now no one was laughing. The Velkari counselors sat with their scales darkened in anger. The Thren were clicking their mandibles nervously. Even species that usually stayed neutral were paying attention. Daehyun sat beside her this time, not in the observation gallery. He was a witness now, not a spectator. Minho and Jiwon were there too. They had all been summoned to testify. Threshamora spoke first, his voice cold. The human expedition accessed a precursor facility without council authorization. They removed data without proper archaeological protocols. They destroyed the site either through incompetence or malice. These are serious violations. The site self-destructed, Hyejin responded calmly, as precursor sites often do when accessed. We followed all established protocols. We filed our expedition plans with the council months ago. Plans to visit ruins, not to activate ancient technology, another counselor shouted. Do you understand what you've done? Precursor technology is dangerous. It should be studied carefully by experts, not grabbed by the first primitive species that stumbles across it. Daehyun felt Minho tense beside him. The insults were starting again, primitive, incompetent, children playing with matches. It never changed, but Hyejin remained calm. She had been preparing for this moment since they received the Sejong's message. Counselor Threshamora, you said we accessed the site without authorization, but the precursor facility didn't require council authorization. It required understanding their language, which we have. The chamber went silent. Threshamora's scales shifted to a dark red. Impossible. The precursor language has been studied for millennia. The finest minds in the galaxy have attempted to decode it. To suggest that humans who have been in space for less than a century somehow succeeded where we failed is absurd. And yet, Hyejin gestured to Daehyun. Here we are. Daehyun, please demonstrate. Daehyun stood slowly. His heart was pounding. Hundreds of alien eyes watched him. He thought about the sphere, about its message. Power without wisdom leads to ruin. What he did next would determine humanity's future, maybe the galaxy's future. He began to speak in precursor tongue. The words flowed from him, carrying emotion and meaning in equal measure. The symbols on the council chamber walls, those ancient decorations that had been meaningless for millions of years, began to glow. Soft blue light spread across them like sunrise. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Systems that hadn't responded in eons suddenly came alive. Holographic displays flickered into existence, showing data streams in precursor script. Environmental controls shifted. The station's AI, built on precursor architecture that no one truly understood, began responding to Daehyun's voice. He spoke for 3 minutes. When he stopped, the chamber was silent. The glow faded from the walls, but everyone had seen it. Proof. Undeniable proof that humans could do something the council could not. Threshamora stood, his whole body shaking. How is this possible? Daehyun found his voice steady despite his nerves. Because we approached it differently. You treated the precursor language like a mathematical code, logic and structure. But it's not just that. It's emotional, musical. It requires feeling, not just thinking. And it requires something else. What? The question came from Tareth, a younger Velkari who Daehyun had seen in previous sessions. Unlike Threshamora, Tareth seemed more curious than angry. Mortality, Daehyun said. The precursors designed their language to be understood by species who truly live, who feel time pressing on them. Urgency, loss, hope, all the things that come from knowing your life is finite. The eternal species never developed those perspectives. You have all the time in the universe. You can always figure something out later. But we don't. We have decades. So we feel things more intensely. We pay attention differently. He pulled out a data crystal from his pocket, small, barely the size of a fingernail but containing terabytes of information. This is what we recovered from the precursor facility. Medical advances that could extend your already long lives by thousands more years. Energy systems that would make your reactors obsolete overnight. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days. Weapons that could shatter planets. Materials that self-repair. AI that thinks faster than any organic mind. The precursors had technology that makes everything we use today look primitive. The chamber erupted, species shouting over each other, demands for the data, threats of consequences if humans didn't share, offers of alliances, trade deals, military partnerships, chaos. Threshmore's voice cut through the noise. You will surrender that data to the Council immediately. It belongs to all species, not just humanity. Does it? Hyejin's voice was sharp. When we petitioned for membership, you told us we were too primitive to join. Too young, too emotional, too mortal. All the things that apparently qualified us to access precursor knowledge. If we're children playing with weapons, why do you want what we found? Because it's dangerous in your hands. And safe in yours? Hyejin laughed, but there was no humor in it. The precursors destroyed themselves with this technology. They were powerful, ancient, wise, and they still failed. They tore their civilization apart fighting over how to use it. What makes you think you'd do better? She stepped forward, and every eye in the chamber was on her. Humanity offers this knowledge freely to the Council, but with conditions. We share it gradually, carefully, with oversight to ensure it's not weaponized or monopolized, and humans must be part of that oversight, not as observers, not as junior partners, as equals. Equals? Threshmore's voice was venomous. You achieved one thing. One. And now you demand equality with civilizations that have existed for hundreds of thousands of years? Yes, Hyejin said simply. Because we achieved the one thing that matters. We understood what you couldn't. We spoke the language you've been staring at for millennia without comprehending. If that doesn't earn respect, what does? Tareth spoke up, his voice thoughtful. She has a point, High Counselor. The humans succeeded where we failed. That deserves recognition. It deserves study, Threshmore snapped. We need to understand how they did it. Bring your linguists forward. We'll test them. Verify these claims. Daehyun stepped forward again. I can teach you. The language. It's not easy, and it requires approaching language in ways your species might find uncomfortable. But it can be learned by anyone willing to try. Several counselors looked interested. Others looked offended by the suggestion that they needed to be taught anything by humans. Hyejin pressed the advantage. The vote. Let's take it again. Full council membership for humanity. With voting rights. With equal standing. If you vote yes, we begin teaching the precursor language immediately. We share the data we recovered in a structured, careful manner. We work together to ensure this knowledge benefits everyone. And if we vote no, Threshmore asked, then we keep the knowledge to ourselves. We continue our own research. We advance on our own. And in a few centuries, when human technology surpasses yours because we have precursor data, and you don't, you'll regret this moment. It was a threat, barely veiled. Minho looked worried. Threatening the council was dangerous. But Daehyun understood what Hyejin was doing. She was speaking their language now. Not precursor tongue, but the language of power and leverage, something the council understood perfectly. This is blackmail, someone shouted. This is negotiation, Hyejin corrected. You want what we have. We want recognition and respect. That's how deals work. Threshmore looked at her with something that might have been respect. The council chamber was enormous. It floated in space, orbiting a dead star that pulsed with strange light. Inside, representatives from 50 different alien species sat in curved rows, watching the humans below with barely hidden amusement. Daehyun sat in the observation gallery, his fingers tight around his data tablet. He watched Hyejin stand at the speaking platform, her voice steady despite the atmosphere in the room. She was presenting humanity's petition for full membership in the Galactic Council. Right now, humans could only watch. They couldn't vote. They couldn't make decisions. They were like children allowed to sit at the adult table but not allowed to speak. Humanity has achieved faster than light travel, Hyejin said. Her words translated into 50 languages by the chamber's systems. We have mapped 300 star systems. We have developed quantum computing and genetic medicine that has eliminated most diseases from our worlds. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Daehyun a moment to realize it was laughter. Not loud, mocking laughter, but the quiet chuckling of beings who found something adorably naive. High Counselor Threshmore raised one clawed hand. The Velkari were reptilian, their scales shifting colors with their moods. Right now, Threshmore's scales were a deep purple, which Daehyun had learned meant condescension. Ambassador. Threshmora's voice was smooth, almost kind, which made it worse somehow. These achievements you speak of are indeed impressive. For your species. But the Valkyrie discovered faster-than-light travel 40,000 years ago. When your ancestors were still learning to make fire, we were crossing galaxies. More laughter. Hyejin's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. Another counselor spoke up, this one from the insectoid Thren species. Your quantum computers are charming. We have organic neural networks that span entire solar systems. They process more data in a second than your entire civilization has generated in its whole existence. And your medicine? A third voice, this from a being made of living crystal. You celebrate eliminating disease. We eliminated death itself 20,000 years ago. Individual death, I should clarify. How quaint that you still experience it. Daehyun felt his colleague Minho tense beside him in the gallery. Minho's hands were balled into fists. This is insulting, Minho whispered. We came here in good faith. Stay calm, Daehyun whispered back. But inside he felt the same burning frustration. Hyejin tried again. We understand we are young compared to your civilizations, but youth brings new perspectives, fresh ideas. We believe we can contribute. Contribute what? Threshmora interrupted. You people still war among yourselves. Even now, as you stand here asking to join us, there are conflicts on your homeworld. You are children playing with weapons you barely understand. Children who might hurt themselves and others. The council chamber had inscriptions on its walls, ancient symbols that covered every surface. They had been there for millions of years, left by whoever built this station originally. The current species called them the precursors, an ancient civilization that disappeared long before any of the current species evolved. The symbols were beautiful, complex patterns that seemed almost alive in the strange light. None of the current species could read them. The Valkyrie had spent 10,000 years trying to decode the language. They failed. Now the inscriptions were just decoration, pretty reminders of a mystery no one could solve. But Daehyun kept looking at them. He had been studying these symbols for 3 years. Not officially, not as part of any human project, just his own obsession. He was a linguistic specialist, and something about the precursor language called to him. The patterns were different from any known language. They had structure, yes, but also something else. Something emotional, almost musical. During Hyejin's speech, Daehyun noticed something. When she talked about human achievements, certain symbols on the wall seemed to shimmer slightly. It was so subtle he thought he imagined it. But no, there it was again. A faint pulse of light in the inscriptions responding to, what? Her voice? Her words? The emotion behind them? The vote will now be called, Threshmora announced. All those in favor of granting humanity full council membership with voting rights? Silence. All those opposed? A chorus of affirmative sounds in dozens of languages. The translation system rendered it as a simple word on Daehyun's tablet. Denied. Hyejin bowed slightly, her face carefully neutral. Thank you for your consideration. Humanity will continue to prove its worth. As the human delegation stood to leave, Threshmora spoke again. Ambassador Hyejin, please understand. This is not personal. We simply cannot grant such authority to a species so unproven. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have matured, we can revisit this discussion. 1,000 years. To the Valkyrie, that was nothing. They lived for millennia. 1,000 years was like a weekend to them. But to humans, 1,000 years was 30 generations. It was the gap between the Middle Ages and spaceflight. It was an eternity. Minho was shaking with anger as they walked down the long corridor from the chamber. Matured? They treat us like we're toddlers. Hyejin's diplomatic mask cracked slightly. That's exactly what we are to them. Toddlers. And we just proved we can't even get a seat at their table. Daehyun wasn't listening. He had stopped in the corridor, turned back toward the chamber. Through the transparent walls, he could still see the inscriptions glowing softly in the starlight. Daehyun. Hyejin noticed he wasn't following. Are you coming? Those symbols, Daehyun said quietly. The precursor language on the walls. Did you notice anything when you were speaking? Notice what? They were reacting. Subtly, but I saw it. When you talked about human emotions, human passion, they pulsed with light. Minho frowned. That's probably just the station's lighting system. A reflection from the star outside. But Daehyun shook his head. No, it was specific, targeted, like they were responding to something in your speech. Hyejin looked back at the chamber, then at Daehyun. She had known him for 5 years, worked with him on linguistic projects. He wasn't prone to flights of fancy. When Daehyun noticed patterns, they were usually real. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Daehyun pulled up files on his tablet, images of precursor ruins from a dozen different dead worlds, all showing the same script, the same beautiful, mysterious symbols. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that maybe the reason the Velkari can't read this language isn't because it's too complex. Maybe it's because they're approaching it wrong. They're treating it like a mathematical code. But what if it's not? What if it's something else, something that requires what? Humanity," Daehyun finished. "What if this language requires the one thing they keep mocking us for? Emotion, passion, the urgency that comes from knowing we only live 100 years. What if our weakness is actually our strength?" The corridor was silent except for the hum of the station systems. Hyejin and Minho stared at Daehyun. Finally, Hyejin spoke. "That's a big what if. Do you have any evidence?" "Not yet," Daehyun admitted. "But I'm going to find some. Request permission to join the Deep Space Archaeological Expedition. The one going to the rim worlds. Those are dead planets. Nothing there but ruins millions of years old." "Exactly," Daehyun said. His eyes had a light in them now, the fire of purpose. "Ruins covered in precursor script. Give me 6 months. If I'm wrong, I'll come back and we'll try the political route again. But if I'm right—" "If you're right," Minho said, understanding dawning, "we might have something the Council needs, something even the Velkari couldn't achieve." Hyejin considered this, then nodded. 6 months. "But Daehyun, don't get your hopes up. Every species has tried to crack that language. Brilliant minds have worked on it for millennia." "I know," Daehyun said, "but none of them were human." They left the station on the next transport ship. Behind them, the council chamber continued its business, the ancient symbols on its walls glowing softly in the darkness. Waiting. Always waiting. For someone to finally understand what they were trying to say. The ship Sejong cut through the darkness between stars, its hull reflecting distant galaxies. Inside, Daehyun stared at 3 holographic displays simultaneously, each showing different precursor ruins from different dead worlds. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He had been working for 16 hours straight. "You need to rest," Minho said, bringing him a cup of coffee. Real coffee, imported from Earth at ridiculous expense. On deep space expeditions, small comforts mattered. "I'm close to something," Daehyun muttered, not looking away from the displays. "Look at this." This symbol appears on 17 different worlds, always in the same context, always near doorways or entrances. Minho looked at the symbol. It was complex with flowing lines that seemed to curve in impossible ways. Beautiful but meaningless to him. "So it means door, maybe? Or entrance." That's what the Velkari concluded. "But look," Daehyun pulled up another file. "This same symbol appears in what we think are precursor libraries, and here in what might be medical facilities, and here in residential areas. If it just means door, why is it everywhere? Maybe they really liked doors?" Daehyun shot him a look. Minho held up his hands. "Sorry, bad joke. I cope with confusion through humor." 3 months had passed since they left the council station. 3 months of jumping from one dead world to another, scanning ruins, cataloging symbols, taking measurements. The expedition had 17 people: archaeologists, linguists, engineers, and a small security team led by a woman named Yoonji. The expedition leader was Jiwon, Daehyun's former professor. She was brilliant but cautious. Right now she was arguing with the ship's captain, Tae-hyun, about their next destination. "That system is uncharted," Tae-hyun was saying, his military background evident in his stance. "No council presence. If we run into pirates or equipment failure, no one can reach us in time." "Which is exactly why the ruins there might be pristine," Jiwon countered. "Untouched. The council species have picked over every accessible site. We need to go further." Taehyun sighed. "Fine. But if we die out there, I'm noting my objection in the log." They arrived at the planet 5 days later. It had no name, just a catalog number, Koresh 7. Scans showed it was barren, no atmosphere, no life. But beneath the surface there were structures. Massive structures, protected by some kind of energy field that had lasted millions of years. "That's not possible," one of the engineers said, staring at the readings. "Nothing can maintain power for that long." The universe's entropy alone should have degraded any power source ages ago. Precursor technology, Ji-won said simply. We barely understand what they could do. Dae-hyun felt his heart racing. This was different from the other sites. Those had been ruins, ancient and dead. This felt alive somehow. Active. They landed near the largest structure. It rose from the planet's surface like a mountain, but too geometrically perfect to be natural. The angles were wrong, the proportions unsettling to human eyes. Architecture designed by minds that thought differently. Yoonji and her security team established a perimeter while the academics approached. The entrance was sealed, covered entirely in precursor script. More symbols than Dae-hyun had ever seen in one place. They covered every centimeter of the massive doorway. Can you read it? Ji-won asked. Dae-hyun stepped closer, his breath fogging in his helmet. They were in full environmental suits. The planet had no air. He studied the symbols, comparing them to the database in his portable tablet. Some of it, he said slowly. This one here means... No, not means, that's the wrong word. It evokes the concept of waiting. This one suggests hope. This one is about legacy. You're talking about them like they have emotions, Minho said. Because they do, Dae-hyun realized. That's what I've been missing. Everyone translates precursor script like it's a technical manual. Subject, verb, object, but it's not structured that way. It's structured like music, like poetry. Each symbol has a logical meaning, but also an emotional resonance. He pulled up his research files, years of work suddenly making sense. Human languages evolved from emotional expression. Before we had complex grammar, we had sounds that meant danger or food or love. We added structure later, but that emotional foundation remained. What if the precursors were similar? What if their language requires you to feel it, not just think it? Ji-won was listening intently now. So how do you read it? You don't read it. You speak it. With intention. With emotion. Dae-hyun took a deep breath. He had been practicing this for months using phonetic patterns he had identified. Human vocal cords were incredibly flexible compared to most species. The Valkyrie could only produce sounds in a narrow frequency range. Their telepathic communication had made complex verbal language unnecessary. But humans relied entirely on voice. They could produce an enormous range of sounds, tones, and emotional inflections. He began to speak the symbols aloud. The sounds were strange, like singing, but not quite. Words that rose and fell in pitch, that carried weight and feeling. He didn't just say them. He meant them. He felt the patience of millions of years, the hope that someone would finally come, the legacy being passed forward. Nothing happened. Minho shifted uncomfortably. Maybe. Then the doorway hummed. A deep vibration that they felt in their bones, even through their suits. The symbols began to glow. Soft blue light spreading from one to the next like fire across paper. The massive door split down the middle and began to open. It worked, Ji-won breathed. After 3 million years, you opened a precursor door. They entered carefully. Emergency lights flickered on automatically, sensing their presence. The corridor beyond was vast, built for beings much larger than humans. Or perhaps just built by beings who thought on a grander scale. The technology inside was incomprehensible. Devices whose purpose they could only guess at. Displays showing data in precursor script, and everywhere more inscriptions. The walls were covered in them, flowing text that seemed to tell a story. They walked for what felt like hours, going deeper. Finally, they reached a central chamber. In its center was a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a sphere of light. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Is that a power source? Taehyun asked over the radio. He had stayed with the ship but was monitoring everything through their helmet cameras. I don't think so, Dae-hyun said. He approached slowly. The sphere seemed to watch him. I think it's a computer, or an intelligence, or both. The sphere pulsed faster. Then it spoke. Not in sound but in light. Symbols appeared in the air around it, precursor script forming and dissolving like smoke. Dae-hyun found he could understand it. Not perfectly, but enough. It was introducing itself, explaining. A guardian left behind. A teacher waiting for students worthy of the lesson. What is it saying? Ji-won demanded. Dae-hyun translated as best he could. It says the precursors were the first. They evolved first, spread first, built first. They guided other species, helped them grow. But they became arrogant, complacent. They thought they were eternal, invincible. Then something happened. A disaster. It's not clear what. But they realized they were dying. The sphere showed them images, a galaxy on fire, civilizations collapsing, the precursors in their final days, desperate to leave something behind. They encoded their knowledge in their language, Daehyun continued. But not just any knowledge. Dangerous knowledge, the kind that destroyed them. They didn't want just anyone to have it. Only species who had certain qualities. What qualities? Minyo asked. The sphere pulsed again. More symbols. Daehyun felt emotion wash over him as he read them. Sadness, hope, warning. Emotional depth, he said quietly. Cultural complexity, and mortality. They designed the language to only be fully understood by species that truly lived, that felt the weight of limited time. The eternal species never developed the desperation to understand. They had forever. They could always decode it later. But we don't have forever. We have decades, so we pay attention. We feel urgency. We understand what it means to leave a legacy because our time is so short. The sphere opened. Data streams began flowing from it to Daehyun's tablet. Information, schematics, history, science, medicine, technology, weapons. Everything the precursors knew. Warning lights flashed throughout the chamber. The sphere's light turned from blue to red, pulsing faster now, urgent. What's happening? Yoonji's voice crackled over the radio. She was outside with the security team. Daehyun's tablet was filling with data faster than he could process. Millions of files, each containing knowledge beyond anything humanity had achieved. Medical techniques that could extend life by thousands of years. Energy systems that made fusion reactors look like candles. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days instead of years. And weapons. Terrible weapons that could crack planets like eggs. It's giving us everything, Ji-won said, her own device receiving the same flood of information. All at once. Why now? The sphere projected more symbols. Daehyun translated haltingly. It says, now that it's awake, the site is compromised. Security protocols. The facility will self-destruct to prevent the knowledge from being taken by force. We have 3 hours. 3 hours? Taehyun's voice was sharp. To download millions of years of data? That's not enough time. It's all the time we have, Daehyun said. He was already working, trying to prioritize. What did humanity need most? Medical knowledge? Technology? History? The sphere pulsed again, and this time there was sadness in its light. It showed them images, the precursors at their height, a magnificent civilization that spanned galaxies. Then their fall, civil war, factions fighting over how to use their godlike technology. Some wanted to uplift other species forcefully. Others wanted to rule as gods. Some wanted to ascend beyond physical form. They couldn't agree. And when beings with such power can't agree, the results are catastrophic. They destroyed themselves, Minho said quietly, watching the images play out. All this power and they used it to kill each other. The sphere's message continued. It showed the survivors, the few precursors who remained after the wars. They were horrified by what they had done. They made a choice. They would leave their physical forms behind, upload their consciousness into a higher dimension, but before they left, they hid their knowledge, encoded it in their language, made it so only the right kind of species could access it. The right kind meaning what? Ji-won asked. Species like us? More symbols. Daehyun felt their meaning wash over him. Species that understand consequences, that feel loss. The precursors failed because immortality made them careless. When you have infinite time, mistakes can always be fixed later. But we don't have infinite time. Every choice matters because our lives are so short. That makes us careful, thoughtful. We have to be. The download continued. 2 hours and 40 minutes remaining. Daehyun's hands flew across his tablet, organizing data as fast as he could. Ji-won was doing the same. They had to save as much as possible, but the sphere wasn't finished. It projected one final image. A warning. The knowledge it contained was dangerous. The same technology that could cure diseases could create plagues. The same energy systems that could power civilizations could be weaponized. The same understanding of physics that allowed faster-than-light travel could be used to tear holes in reality itself. Why give it to us then? Daehyun asked the sphere. If it's so dangerous, why not let it stay buried? The sphere's response was simple. Every civilization faces this test, the moment when their capability outpaces their wisdom. Most fail. They destroy themselves like the precursors nearly did. But some, A precious few survive by making the right choices, by choosing cooperation over domination, growth over power. The precursors couldn't give species wisdom. That had to be earned. But they could give the tools and let each civilization decide what to build with them. Daehyun understood. This was the great filter that scientists talked about, the reason why the galaxy wasn't teeming with advanced civilizations. Most destroyed themselves when they reached this point. Humanity was reaching it now. What they did with this knowledge would determine whether humans survived the next 1,000 years or went extinct like so many others. 2 hours remaining. They worked frantically. Outside, Yoonji reported that she was seeing energy buildups in the planet's crust. The self-destruct sequence had begun. The entire facility would be vaporized, leaving no trace that it ever existed. "We need to go," Taehyun urged. "We have enough. We can't risk losing what we've gathered." But Daehyun couldn't leave. Not yet. He felt like the sphere had more to tell him, more to teach him. He spoke to it in precursor tongue, asking questions, trying to understand. The sphere responded with patience. It explained the language in ways no translation could capture. It taught Daehyun nuances, emotional contexts, the musical quality that made the words come alive. It was like learning to hear music for the first time after being deaf. Suddenly everything made sense. 1 hour remaining. The facility was shaking now. Small pieces of ceiling were falling. The ancient technology was finally failing after holding for eons. "Daehyun, we're leaving." Jiwon grabbed his arm. "Now!" He took one last look at the sphere. It pulsed once, a final message. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding. Tell the galaxy what you learned here. Not just the technology, but the lesson. Power without wisdom leads only to ruin." They ran. The corridors were collapsing behind them. Automated systems were systematically destroying everything, erasing all evidence. The knowledge could be carried away in data files, but the facility itself would leave no trace. They reached the ship with minutes to spare. Taehyun already had the engines hot. The moment everyone was aboard, he launched. They climbed away from the planet as explosions rippled across its surface. The precursor facility, 3 million years old, vanished in a blaze of light. From orbit, they watched the planet tear itself apart. The energy release was enormous, visible from light years away. Any ships in the area would see it and come to investigate. They needed to leave before anyone arrived with questions they weren't ready to answer. "What do we do now?" Minyo asked. The weight of what they had discovered was settling on everyone. They had knowledge that could change everything. That could elevate humanity to the level of the Council's most advanced species. But they also had responsibility. Terrible responsibility. Jiwon was already on the communication system, sending an encrypted message to Earth, to Hijin and the human government. They needed guidance. This was too big for one ship to handle alone. Daehyun sat in his quarters, staring at his tablet. Files and files of precursor knowledge, enough to keep human scientists busy for centuries. But the sphere's warning echoed in his mind. This knowledge destroyed its creators. What would it do to humanity? He thought about the Council, the Velkari and their arrogance. They had tried for 10,000 years to decode the precursor language and failed. Now humans had succeeded in 3 months. How would they react? With respect? Or with fear and jealousy? The sphere had said something else right at the end. Daehyun had almost missed it in the chaos of the evacuation. A final piece of advice. The knowledge was important, yes. But more important was what species did with it. The precursors failed because they couldn't work together. Different factions, different goals, different visions of the future. If humanity wanted to survive, they needed to avoid that mistake. But humanity was already divided. Nations and corporations and ideologies pulling in different directions. And now they had godlike technology. Would it unite them or tear them further apart? Daehyun opened a file at random. It contained medical data, treatments for aging, for cellular decay. With this, humans could potentially live for thousands of years. Like the Velkari, like all the Council species. Was that good? The sphere said mortality was important, that it gave urgency and wisdom, but who would choose to stay mortal if immortality was possible? These were questions beyond his expertise. He was just a linguist, a guy who liked patterns and puzzles. Now he held the fate of his species in his hands. The door chimed. Minyo entered, looking exhausted. "You okay?" "No," Daehyun admitted. "I'm terrified. We found something incredible, but I don't know if we're ready for it." "Nobody's ever ready," Minho said. "That's the point, I think." The sphere didn't want to give this to species who had it all figured out. It wanted to give it to species who were still learning, still growing. That's us. We're messy and young and we make mistakes. But we try. We keep trying. Daehyun nodded slowly. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that's what the precursors wanted. Not perfect inheritors, but honest ones. Species who acknowledged their flaws and tried anyway. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying them back toward human space. Behind them, the dead planet cooled, its secrets finally released after 3 million years of waiting. Ahead, the future waited. Uncertain, dangerous, full of possibility.